Elizabeth Carter is my name, 32 years old. I am Schmidt and Wallace Architecture's youngest partner. My father, Richard Carter, who has been the CEO of Carter Industries for 40 years, is retiring tonight, on stage. My brothers James and Thomas sit on either side of me at table 19. He tells the 200 guests, "I owe everything to my sons." My daughter was never cut out for the real world of business. As cheers break out, something cracks inside of me. I get up, holding a box that has been nicely wrapped, my final present to him before I discuss what transpired that evening and the fallout that permanently altered our family. Tell me in the comments where you're viewing from. Have you ever felt undervalued by someone who ought to have had the greatest faith in you? Click like and subscribe. Believe me, when I left and my father opened the box, what followed was unexpected, particularly him as Richard Carter's only daughter growing up, included living in constant shadow. At the age of 8, I was seated at our opulent dining table for a Sunday family meal when I first remembered being dismissed. I inquired about inventory turnover, a concept I had heard about and studied in my father's business magazines. While Dad was talking to James and Thomas, who were only 11 and 13 at the time, about quarterly estimates, he chuckled. "Why don't you assist your mother with dessert?" Elizabeth. This is business. For the first time, I understood that my father's value was based on my gender. It wasn't the last, though. With just a $5,000 loan from his uncle and a lot of perseverance, Richard Carter founded Carter Industries, born in Cleveland to working-class parents. After completing his studies at State College, he established his manufacturing business at the age of 24. He was 50 times more well-known nationally than he was in his locality. Along with his unwavering standards and traditional beliefs, his story of rising from poverty to fame became famous in the business world. A man builds, he provides, and he leaves a legacy. He would recite it like a dinner script. His icy pragmatism was warmed by my mother, Margaret. She fostered my interest in building and design from a young age and was a former professor of literature who quit her job when James was born. She would spend hours sitting with me as I built intricate structures out of paper, blocks, and anything else I could find. "Your father produces useful things," she would mutter. "You create inspiring things." Breast cancer claimed her life. At the age of 16, left an empty space that no one could fill. While family members were expressing their sympathies at the funeral, I noticed my father talking to his brother. "Well," he continued, "at least my boys can continue the business." He spoke in a quiet voice that I could hear clearly. In the end, it is what counts. Those statements confirmed what I had always thought about my father's world, but I tried not to hear. I was a last-minute idea. My scholastic performance continuously surpasses that of my brother, who was my high school class valedictorian. Thomas and James, however, had been mediocre pupils. While attending state colleges on their father's pay, they received full scholarships to MIT for architecture, maintained a perfect GPA, and occasionally received BS and CSS to get by. Richard Carter did not care about any of it. He said that drawing buildings isn't a legitimate profession when I told him that I had been accepted into the esteemed architecture department at MIT. It is art that has been exalted. No, Carter is not an artist. 3 events in particular stand out as pivotal points in our relationship. When I was 12, the first one occurred. I received state distinction for my Sustainable Building Materials Science Fair project. On a Wednesday evening, the award ceremony took place. When I got my medal and diploma, my mother was there, smiling with joy. Instead, my father was at Thomas's junior varsity basketball game. Thomas, however, was on the bench for the majority of it. The second was the overheard exchange that validated my position in the family hierarchy following the death of my mother. The third was when I graduated from MIT. I had been chosen to deliver the School of Architecture's student address. My dad was 20 minutes late, completely missing my speech. As soon as the ceremony was over, he fled. Throughout the few pictures my mother's sister insisted on taking, he kept checking his watch. James hurried off, explaining that he had a meeting with possible investors. My brother was having lunch with a mid-level manager from a company that Carter Industries already worked with. My brothers were merely complacent in a system that worked for them. They weren't bad people. James would occasionally catch me observing me with a look of shame in his eyes. Thomas once gave me an awkward shoulder pat after our father made a particularly disparaging remark about my pastime. He said, "You know how Dad is." As though that clarified everything. I shocked everyone by turning down Carter Industries' required job offer after graduation. Rather, I took a part-time job at Schmidt& Wallace, a reputable architecture firm that focuses on sustainable urban planning. It isn't going to last. Within a year, my father said, "You'll be back begging for a real job." I became the youngest partner in the 60-year history of the firm 8 years later. The Oscar-like Hammond Award for Innovative Design Architecture went to my design for the Lakefront Commons, a mixed-use development that includes community areas and renewable energy. My pay now surpassed that of both of my brothers. However, I never brought up this fact with any family members. Every accomplishment was met with my father's customary dismissal wrapped in a semblance of admiration. "Lucky break," he continued, referring to my collaboration. "Very good." When I showed him pictures of my award-winning design, he made a comment. "It's not the same as managing a genuine business with hundreds of workers." When Architectural Digest published a profile of me, he said, "We established a courteous distance in our connection. I occasionally saw him at family gatherings and on significant holidays. We didn't have any meaningful chat, we just exchanged niceties. He never remembered the names of my projects or their importance in my profession, so he asked trite questions about my drawings. It wasn't until his retirement gala that I stopped expecting more. The invitation, which announced Richard J.'s retirement, came in an embossed envelope made of rich cream cardstock with gold lettering. Carter Industries founder and CEO, the Grand Marriott, Chicago's downtown, 3 weeks' notice is required for black tie. As my coffee grew cold next to me, I gazed at it while eating breakfast in my condo by the lake. "Will you go?" Marcus inquired, observing me from the other side of the table. My 2-year boyfriend was aware of the complex dynamics inside my family. He saw the parallels in the Carter family structure and had deep knowledge of harmful business dynamics as a corporate psychologist. "I should," I said, but the idea made my stomach turn to knot. During our weekly lunch later that day, my best friend Sophia behaved less tactfully. She stabbed at her salad, warning that he would find a way to make it about your brothers. Over the course of our 15-year association, Sophia had seen far too many interactions with the Carter family. You should expect Richard to be Richard. I thought it was his retirement. He might be introspective. At turning points, people can occasionally gain perspective, more effectively than words. Sophia's raised eyebrow expressed her skepticism. That evening, James gave me an unexpected call. He clarified, "We're creating a tribute video. Could you give any vintage pictures of the family for the montage? Perhaps write a piece on Dad." I spent hours searching through crates of old photos, picking out special moments, even though I wasn't involved in any of the preparation. I'm learning to ride a bike from my dad. When I won a middle school design competition, he gave me his infrequent smile. An unposed photo of him with his arm around my shoulder taken at Christmas when I was 14. I devoted a large paragraph to his vision and resolve. I talked about how I truly appreciated his work ethic and his charitable giving, which was mostly driven by tax advantages but was nonetheless advantageous. His capacity to adjust to shifting market conditions. I didn't bring up our connection. Some facts weren't appropriate for an homage to retiring. The same attention had to be paid to choosing an outfit. In the end, I decided on a fitted blue suit that was appropriate for a work event, but had architectural aspects like cuffs and lapels that expressed my identity as a professional. Respectful professional, and not trying to be someone I wasn't. I was troubled by the gift issue. When a man has all the material things he could ever want but has shown you very little emotional support, what do you give him? Conventional retirement presents felt pointless, golf accessories and watches, fishing equipment. None of them adequately conveyed my thoughts. I had been keeping my mother's safety deposit box since she passed away. And that's when I got the response. She had a sealed envelope with my name in her beautiful script among her jewelry and vital papers. I discovered a few things she had kept for me inside, newspaper articles on my early victories in design contests. She wrote to say how proud she was of my perseverance, pictures of the models I constructed as a kid to show Elizabeth when she needs a boost of confidence. On the envelope, my mother had written. My gift began to take shape at that same instant. Over the course of the following week, I collected more documents, including my architecture license, MIT graduation, award certificates, financial statements, and press clippings pertaining to my most important projects. What it takes is a video montage that I made for a USB disc, recording my career path. I attached a note that read, "Your biggest failure," and wrapped the box in pricey silver paper with a plain navy ribbon in the colors of Carter Industries. Thomas contacted 2 days prior to the gala. Regarding his retirement, Dad has been behaving oddly, continues to edit his speech after reviewing it. Perhaps he is feeling sentimental about the change. Maybe, I said. Thomas concurred, but he didn't sound convinced. In any case, he will appreciate your visit. He brought it up. That brief remark sparked an unwanted optimism that, at last, my father would recognize my accomplishments in his parting speech, that he might see me clearly for the first time at this momentous moment. Marcus volunteered to go for moral support, but I felt like I needed to deal with this on my own, I clarified. This is between me and him. It could be easier with you there, but convenience isn't always preferable. I sat at my home office the night before the gala, looking over my portfolio and reminded myself of what I had accomplished without the Carter name or resources. I nearly decided not to bring the wrapped box as I gazed at it on my coffee table. Then I recalled what my mother had said years before. Telling the truth is sometimes the most compassionate thing we can do. In preparation for tomorrow, I carefully put the box in a tote bag. The magnificent diamond ballroom at the Marriott stood up to its name. Round tables covered in white linen were illuminated by prismatic light from a crystal chandelier. Each centerpiece was anchored by intricate floral arrangements, including orchids, roses, and lilies in exact white and blue pairings. Banners for Carter Industries were placed thoughtfully across the grounds, along with the company's unique emblem, 40 years of excellence in building America's future. I was on time, managed to elude the photographer, and took pictures of the visitors against a branded background. They were in the middle of cocktail hour. Practiced smiles and champagne flutes are shared by business associates dressed in black suits. Is that you? Elizabeth Bernard, a relative of my father, came over. I'm holding a martini. You're still involved in architecture. Then, fascinating pastime. The exchanges that followed were similar. Dad's golfing friends, members of the board. Longtime executives are all a little taken aback by my prolonged presence in the workforce. They'd remark your dad must be proud. Despite what their tone implied, from across the room, where he stood with his wife, Vanessa, and Thomas with his wife, Rebecca, James was the first to notice me and waved. We exchanged the customary brief greetings and compliments on our attire, mentioned recent trips in passing, being cautious to steer clear of any serious subjects. In the corner, Dad is meeting with some Japanese investors, James told me, gesturing to a group of males standing close to the bar. Before you begin, you should say hello, as expected. The conversation with my father was short. As I walked up to him, he excused himself from his chat and gave me a robotic half-hug. You made it. Elizabeth? He looked at my attire. I noticed that you're finally dressing professionally. Dad, congrats on your retirement, I said, ignoring the sarcastic remark. Later. We will discuss. He replied that he was already focusing on someone more significant than me. Your brothers put on a great show that evening. My position in the family hierarchy was validated by the sitting arrangement. At the head table, our father was flanked by James and Thomas. Beside them are their wives. I was placed at table 19 with mid-level staff members and distant relatives. As servers brought the first course, a lobster soup, the tote bag with my present was placed next to my chair. Beyond the constriction in my throat, I was unable to taste. After the main meal, which I had hardly touched, the program started. For the tribute montage, the lights went down and a video screen lowered from the ceiling. Images came, and the music grew. As a young businessman, Richard shook hands with senators and governors while establishing his first factory and winning numerous business honors. There was a lot of video in the family portion showing him coaching Thomas and James in Little League and going to Thomas's college graduation. I was in exactly one picture, a family shot taken when I was around 10 years old before my mother's illness, proudly standing between them at the opening of a new Carter Industries facility. My professional achievements were not mentioned, and my life beyond that childlike picture was not acknowledged. After I decided to leave the family business, it seemed as though I had vanished from the world. Next, a number of co-workers spoke, complimenting Richard on his family values, business sense, and negotiating abilities. The CFO spoke about his commitment to training the future generation. James and Thomas gave a united speech emphasizing their father's mentoring, pointing scathingly at my brothers. James said, "We learned everything we know about business by watching Dad." Thomas continued, "The values he instilled in us continue his legacy." To roaring cheers, Richard Carter finally ascended the podium, 6 feet tall, with silver hair and the assured stance of someone used to commanding attention. He was still formidable at 65. I recognized the action from innumerable family get-togethers and business meals as he fixed his tie. It indicated that he was going to say something significant. After 40 years, he started to watch the crowd. 40 years of creating something out of nothing, from offices in 12 countries to a warehouse in Cleveland. He carried out the anticipated reflections, overcoming risks and overcoming obstacles to reward devoted workers who helped the business succeed. The shift that would alter everything then came. "I am frequently asked what I am most proud of," he went on, his tone becoming more intimate after 40 years in business. "It's simple. James and Thomas, my sons, are carrying on my legacy, and I'm proud of that." His face was heated as he pointed to them. "They have demonstrated that they are capable of advancing Carter Industries. They are aware of strategy, sacrifice, and the accountability that accompanies leadership." He seemed to look around the room during this period before focusing on me. The room became quieter. Unlike my daughter, who took a different route, observing the change in tone, he went on, "I used to worry about Elizabeth, as though talking about a bad investment. However, I've come to terms with the fact that she just never had what it took to be here. Not everyone is suited for the real corporate world." The audience erupted in uneasy, scattered laughing. A number of individuals looked at me, at the head table. Expressions ranged from shame to sympathy. James took a close look at his plate. Thomas moved a little, but said nothing. I felt a scorching sensation all across my chest. Suddenly, the room appeared too warm and the crystal chandelier lights were too brilliant. I held on to the table's edge, resisting the need to cry, not to let his casual brutality break me and give him the satisfaction of seeing me. With pride in every word, Richard went on to describe the individual achievements of each kid. Carter Industries remained profitable thanks to James's successful negotiations of the European expansion, Thomas's creative supply chain restructuring, and their combined leadership during the pandemic. As rivals stumbled, my brother's business sense is the topic of 5 minutes. No more mention of his only daughter. A standing ovation broke out in the room as he finally finished. Men and women in business sprang up, cheering the great Richard Carter and his sons, who would carry on his tradition. I sat there with one hand gripping the gift box I had taken out of the tote bag, and the other so tightly that my fingernails made crescent marks on my palm. I decided at that very time. I picked up the box, straightened my jacket, and started to make my way to the stage. The sound of my heels clicking on the shiny floor sounded strangely loud. Around me, the chatter gradually subsided. I took my time, keeping my gaze on my father, who was still standing at the podium, microphone in hand, taking congrats from the people closest to the stage. As he noticed my approach from behind, his attitude changed from one of victory to one of perplexity. James got up halfway from his chair, not sure if he should stop me. Thomas gently restrained his brother by moving his hand on his arm, knowing that 200 pairs of eyes were watching me every step of the way. I climbed the 3 stairs to the stage. My face stayed composed. I had learned to exude confidence regardless of my inner condition from years of presenting design concepts to important clients. But inside, a voice cried out, "Run!" As my heart pounded against my ribs. "Go, get away." I put an end to it and moved on. When I got to Richard, his smile tightened, a reflexive business look that stopped short of his eyes. He whispered softly, "Elizabeth," while continuing to grasp the microphone. "Now is not the moment. Dad, congrats on your retirement." Despite my internal distress, I spoke steadily. "I have something for you." I held out the silver box in his direction. He didn't accept it right away. His face was a mixture of alarm and irritation. With a note of caution in his voice, he reiterated, "Elizabeth, now isn't the time for gifts." "It seems like the perfect moment, keeping the box between us." I answered, "It comes from your most significant failure. When I'm gone, open it." I turned away from the microphone, handed the item to him, and left the stage. Before he could answer, the ballroom was completely silent. The steps had high shoulders back as I went down, releasing all the professional poise I'd developed over years of negotiating male-dominated environments. I passed the head table where my brothers were seated frozen, the corporate executives with their shocked looks, the distant relatives and family friends who suddenly found their dessert plates fascinating, the grand double doors, and the hotel lobby with its muted lighting and thankfully sparse occupancy. I didn't lose my cool until I got to my car in the parking garage. Sobs tore from my chest as I struggled with the keys and eventually collapsed into the driver's seat, tears blurring my eyesight. Years of disillusionment, contempt, and silent anger poured forth in an uncontrollable flood. Until my breathing stabilized sufficiently for me to drive, I held onto the steering wheel and pressed my forehead against its cool surface. I only drove 3 blocks after leaving the garage before I had to stop. I had openly challenged Richard Carter, the untouchable patriarch, after being overcome once more by the enormity of what had just transpired. We had kept up a facade of family peace for appearances, but I had left. There was no turning back. James's text messages and other notifications started to vibrate on my phone. "Then what did you give him?" "Are you all right?" "From Dodd? Thomas?" "He appears to have seen a ghost." "Then give me a call." I hung up and went home in a weird emotional limbo, feeling as though I had used up every last bit of emotion I had, neither triumphant nor regretful. Marcus had returned from his evening work event and was waiting in my flat. He only had to glance at my face to know what I was talking about. "That's awful." He opened his arms and begged. As I recollected the night, my father's public humiliation, my impetuous reaction, and the present I had left behind, I melted into his embrace and allowed myself the warmth of being held. I clarified that it was everything I had saved over the years. Crying makes your voice rough. My honors, diplomas, and publicity regarding the financial performance of my building. I made more money than Thomas and James put together. Mom's letter expressing her pride in my perseverance, the USB containing my career video. I stopped him from seeing or acknowledging anything. In the note, Marcus termed you his biggest failure while softly stroking my hair. I said his words, not mine. When he believed I couldn't hear, he called me such in front of family members. I wanted him to see the full impact of his failure. "Now, what do you hope will happen?" Marcus inquired thoughtfully. I gave the question some attention and saw that I hadn't given it any thought outside of leaving. I said, "I don't know. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps he will see me for who I truly am, rather than what he desired me to be. Perhaps it is no longer relevant." However, even as I said those words, I knew they weren't totally accurate. I wouldn't have made the box in the first place if it had mattered. With the ballroom doors closing behind his daughter, Richard Carter stood still at the stage, clutching the silver-wrapped box. His erratic breathing was picked up by the microphone and played loudly throughout the quiet room. 200 visitors watched a family drama while remaining still in a state of communal unease. None had anticipated taking part. James leaned toward his father as he made his way to the platform. Let's continue with the program. Dad, he said calmly. Later. We can handle this. Richard made the hardly noticeable motion of shaking his head. Without speaking to his kid, his fingers tightened their hold on the box, causing the pricey wrapping paper to wrinkle. He carefully separated the tape from the silver paper and started removing the navy ribbon. Every sound, including the faint tremor, the whisper of paper, and his breathing, was captured by the microphone. There were no clues about what was inside the simple white box underneath. Richard opened the lid and gazed inside, his face changing from annoyance to perplexity to something more nuanced. He took them out one by one. First, the framed MIT certificate appeared, with Elizabeth Carter's name and the honors summa cum laude prominently displayed for everyone closest to the stage. After placing it on the platform and taking away her architectural license, he briefly examined it before placing it next to the diploma. Next was the medal for the Hammond Award. He held it up for a moment before recognizing it, its glossy surface glinting in the light. He paused, recognition flashing across his features, then saw a yellowed letter addressed in handwriting, followed by a USB disk with the title What It Takes, the handwriting of Margaret, letter from his late wife to their daughter, as though it had burned his fingertips. He hurriedly put it down and carried on unloading the package, financial accounts, and newspaper clippings, images of sleek, contemporary structures. Elizabeth's designs have won awards and been built all over the world. At last, one note card appeared from the box's bottom. In silence, Richard read it. The ballroom lights made his face look paler. He set his hand on top of the other objects. Trembling a little, it said, "You used concrete and steel to construct buildings. I construct them with passion and vision. Both need what it takes. Being your daughter taught me how to be resilient, even when you were unable to recognize my value. Dad, goodbye." Richard gazed at the gathered proof of his daughter's accomplishment. For years, he had disregarded, minimized, or ignored success. As he tried to gather himself, the microphone stayed on, recording his audible swallow. He started, but stopped, perhaps for the first time in his career, unable to find the right words. He tried again after clearing his throat. "We'll end the formal part of the evening, I think. Enjoy the rest of the festivities. Please." With unusual care, he collected the objects back into the box and moved away from the podium. James replaced him right away. "I appreciate everyone's attendance tonight as we celebrate my father's legacy." Despite the strain in his voice, he maintained a professional, contrived smile. "The bar will stay open, and I invite everyone to take advantage of the live music and dessert buffet." Conversations among the guests were hesitantly resumed when the band started performing. Richard Carter sat by himself at the head table, carefully going over everything in the box. He read his late wife's words of pride and support for their daughter and Margaret's letter. He looked over Elizabeth's remarkable income and investment portfolio in the financial statements, as though seeing it for the first time. He turned the Hammond Award over in his hands. With a cautious approach, Thomas touched his father's shoulder. "Are you all right, Dad?" Richard's face was unreadable as he looked up. "What did she provide you?" Pointing to the objects arranged on the table, Thomas posed the question. Richard's answer could hardly be heard over the band's song. "Everything. I couldn't see since I was blind." A week following the retirement celebration, "I give my work my whole attention. I'm thankful for the intricate riverbank development project that required all of my attention. My privacy was respected by my coworkers at Schmidt and Wallace. I was trailed through the office by the whispering. News spread fast in small architectural groups. In addition to becoming an award-winning architect, I had also become Elizabeth Carter, who openly challenged business mogul Richard Carter. Since that evening, my father had left 7 voicemails. None of them had gotten past my ears. At least listen to what he has to say. Sophia recommended that we have lunch at our regular cafe. She had been checking in on me every day, even if it was only to obtain closure. After learning about the incident from mutual acquaintances, I'm not prepared. As I pushed the salad around my plate, I confessed. I'll be right back in that cycle, looking for recognition, as soon as I hear his voice, feeling let down, making justifications for him. All right, she said. However, you will eventually have to make a decision on the type of relationship you wish to pursue, if any. My decision to keep my distance was exacerbated by the unexpected visitor to my office that afternoon, at 3 p.m. James showed up in my doorway, looking rather unkempt in a rumpled shirt, his customary assurance replaced by hesitancy. "May I enter?" Hovering at the threshold, he questioned. I saved my work and pointed to the chair across from my desk before focusing entirely on him. "This is unexpected." He raked a hand through his hair. "Yes, in moments of despair." "What does that signify?" James put his elbows on his knees and leaned forward. "Liz, Dad hasn't been out of the home since the party. He called off the golf outing. For months, he has been making plans. He is not answering board calls. People are beginning to ask inquiries, but Thomas and I are still interfering." "That's not my problem," I said, maintaining a neutral tone of voice in spite of the sudden worry. "Throughout his life, Richard Carter has never missed a day of work, even while my mom was sick." He observed her USP. "James went on to discuss your career in the video. He has performed it numerous times." I felt a complex emotion move in my chest. I was not ready to look. "How are you aware?" "Because he forced us to watch it as well when he summoned us over the day after the gala." James regarded his hands. "I didn't know. Liz, the global initiatives, the advances in sustainability, the influence your creations have on the community." "Not a bit. You didn't inquire." I made a point. "No, I didn't." He looked right into my eyes. I like being the favored too much. It was simpler to ignore the dynamic. I was astonished by his candor. James had always been the family's diplomat, resolving disputes with showmanship rather than dealing with their underlying problems. "You're here." "But why I inquired," James said. "He wants to talk to you. He is, however, honoring your quiet. He is aware that he is not worthy of your time. In that regard, he is correct. Just..." James paused. "Examine your email. Yesterday. He sent something." I attempted to concentrate on my job after he departed, but curiosity soon got the better of me. I discovered a note from my father in my personal email. Time marked the night before and 213A. The topic line was straightforward. "I apologize." There were just 2 sentences in the body. Everything was visible to me on the USB. I was mistaken. "When you're ready, may we speak no justifications, no qualifications, no overtones of passive aggression, just a request and an acknowledgement." Without replying, I ended the email and scheduled a flight to Singapore for the next week. A developer of a high-end hotel had asked for advice on a sustainable remodeling project. The ideal justification for separating oneself from the Carter family drama by 7,000 miles. I became aware of an architectural news alert 3 days into my trip to Singapore. The new green architecture division of Carter Industries has been announced. Richard Carter has delayed his retirement indefinitely to lead the new project, according to the press announcement that went with it. For me, my phone rang practically instantly. "Did you see it, Thomas?" he inquired without introducing himself. I just responded to the news release. According to Thomas, he has been studying sustainable building techniques constantly, invited experts from 3 distinct environmental engineering companies. He is discussing the establishment of new carbon-neutral manufacturing procedures and the retrofitting of all Carter properties with solar. It's surprising. I struggled to comprehend this knowledge. Thomas went on to say, "It's because of your video, especially the part about how traditional construction is responsible for 40% of global carbon emissions. He insists that she was there in front of me the entire time. All I promised when I hung off the phone was that these developments would make me feel more and more unstable. Did this represent a true revelation or a complex ploy to reclaim the story with Richard Carter? There was no way of knowing." 2 weeks later, I returned to Chicago and discovered that my apartment had received a sizable shipment. My father's house was the return address. I left it open for 2 days until my curiosity overtook my caution once more. I discovered a roll of blueprints inside the envelope, bound with a plain black ribbon. When I unfolded them across my dining table, I saw intricate blueprints for a community center, something quite different from Carter Industries' typical commercial or industrial projects. Questions concerning community engagement spaces, natural lighting optimization, and sustainable materials were written in the margins in my father's unique handwriting. My mother's hometown of Franklin, Ohio, where she had been raised in humble circumstances before receiving a scholarship to Northwestern University, where she and my father had first met, was the suggested site. The blueprints came with a handwritten letter on Richard Carter's own stationery. These past few weeks, Elizabeth, have been a period of hard but essential introspection. Your mother would have referred to the box you gave me as a moment of reckoning, made me face realities that I had been evading for decades. As a father, I let you down. I set restrictions based on antiquated ideas. Instead of witnessing your exceptional talents, I mistakenly believed that your unusual path meant that you didn't share my ideals, but in reality, you exemplified them in ways that I couldn't see. Without my help, you created something amazing, demonstrating more of what it takes than I ever realized. In her letter, your mother noticed it. Your perseverance would take you farther than my connections could. She wrote, as usual, she was correct on significant issues. My initial attempt at making amends is represented by the blueprints that are attached. A community center in your mother's hometown that offers social assistance, educational materials, and artistic programming to a community that is underprivileged. I would be grateful if you could give your expert assessment of the design and maybe even consider contributing to its creation. When and if you're ready to communicate, I can understand if you need more time and space. I apologize, and I'm here with respect. I read the letter 3 times. Dad, looking for the typical condescending or manipulative undertones, but I didn't find any. Despite the technical shortcomings of someone who was only learning about architectural concepts, the designs demonstrated real consideration and research. I texted my dad coffee at Lakefront Cafe on Wednesday at 10 a.m. after giving it some thought for 2 days. He responded immediately, I'll be present. I went to the Lakefront Cafe on a work basis, but it had no family connections, so it was neutral territory. I got there early, ordered a cappuccino to calm myself, and chose a table overlooking Lake Michigan. At exactly 10, Richard Carter showed in, looking very different from his retirement gala appearance. The immaculate suit was still there, but he appeared to have lost some of his usual assurance in favor of prudence. In the weeks since I'd last seen him, he had clearly aged. I had never before noticed the slight bend to his shoulders or the new creases around his mouth. Elizabeth, he replied, clumsily standing next to the table. I appreciate you agreeing to meet. I pointed to the chair across from me. Do you want coffee? Black, please, he said, carefully positioning himself in the seat as though unsure if he would be welcomed. After his order was taken by the server, there was silence between us. Richard Carter seemed speechless for the first time in his memory. At last, I mentioned the community center project. The idea is intriguing. At this neutral opening, a spark of relief passed across his features. He acknowledged that it needs repair. I've been doing research, but knowledge is indispensable. Franklin, why? Despite my suspicion that I already knew the answer, I inquired. He confirmed my idea by saying, your mother always wanted to give back to her hometown. He drifted off, looking out at the lake, but she mentioned starting a scholarship foundation after she fell ill. That was a promise I never kept to her. Another moment of stillness, this time weighed down by mutual regret and sorrow. He said, I saw your presentation. And lastly, the USB. I've already seen it 17 times. For a moment, a self-deprecating smirk appeared on his face. After counting, I discovered that I had been mistaken, not only about you, but also about what matters and what success looks like. He looked right into my eyes. Your Commons project by the lake, its transformation of that community produced inexpensive dwellings without compromising aesthetics, included green areas that served as a unifying factor for the neighborhood. Legacy, Elizabeth said. That's creating something significant. There was no mistaking the earnestness in his voice. Years of disappointment, however, had made me wary. What was different, I inquired. In addition, my accomplishments were so obvious that it was impossible to overlook them. He gave the subject some serious thought. You're not, he concluded, referring to constructing with heart and vision. It made me think of something your mother used to say when I rejected one of your early designs. He clearly swallowed. I couldn't see you were building a better world because I was so focused on building an empire, she remarked. The sudden echo of my mother made my throat clench. His voice ruffled with emotion as he said, the night before she died, I vowed to support your dreams. No matter what Margaret forced me do, I utterly broke that vow. He hesitated. Did you know that I treated you differently than your brothers? And she confronted me about it. I gave a headshake. Several times. The last occurred around a month prior to her diagnosis. She claimed that by expecting less of you because you were a girl, I was teaching you to have lower expectations of yourself, so creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. His gaze was fixed on his coffee. In that regard, she was mistaken. You were never constrained, even if I tried my hardest to convince you that you should. His remarks' unvarnished honesty pierced the barriers I had erected over many years. I wanted your approval for years. I confessed in the hopes that each accomplishment would eventually be sufficient to get your attention. Now I know that, he said softly. Since the gala, James and Thomas have been very honest about my shortcomings. Family therapy has provided valuable insights. Family counseling. I was too shocked to disguise it. With a touch of his usual dry humor, he affirmed that it was twice a week. Richard Carter on the couch of a therapist. Who would have guessed? Not me. With a grudging smile tugging at my lips, I recognized the community center. Coming back to safer ground, he remarked. Please think about serving as the lead architect. There are no conditions. Your terms. Your vision. I looked closely at him. If I decline, I accept her choice and look for another architect. Without hesitation, he answered, Elizabeth, we're not trying to coerce you back into the family. It all comes down to acknowledging your knowledge and providing a chance. Years ago, one ought to have made an offer. I weighed my emotional self-defense against my professional interest when evaluating his offer. I'll look over the plan. At last. I stated professionally that's all I can do at this time. I don't deserve that much. He nodded. After our coffee, we talked about the technical details of the project's time frame, budgetary restrictions, and community involvement procedures in our relationship. For the first time, he asked questions instead of making judgments and listened more than he talked. We were getting ready to depart. He paused. When you're ready, your brothers want to visit you, I said, not committing, but not denying, one step at a time. That one coffee date turned into frequent project talks over the ensuing weeks. I made major changes to the community center's layout, adding sections for flexible use, community-centered areas, and sustainable materials, in ways that would have been unthinkable months ago. Richard respected my knowledge, asked questions, and made ideas without pressuring me. I hesitantly accepted an offer to Thomas's house for supper after 6 weeks of business dealings. My father went, as did James and his wife. At first, the discussion was tense due to years of ingrained patterns that were difficult to break. However, Richard responded before I could respond when Rebecca, Thomas's wife, inquired about my ongoing efforts. He surprised everyone at the table by saying that Elizabeth's makeover of the community center is groundbreaking. When compared to traditional construction, the incorporation of solar arrays alone will result in a 30% reduction in running expenses. James's whine almost suffocated him. His astonishment made me smile. Dad has been studying environmental design principles in night classes, Thomas said. The community center project cannot be handled by anybody else if you recover first. It's crucial to get it correct, Richard stated plainly. I observed minor but noteworthy changes in our family dynamic as dinner went on. Rather than talking over me, my brothers respected me on subjects in which I was an expert. Richard demonstrated a sincere interest in the cultural factors that shaped my design by asking insightful questions about my most recent Tokyo project. Most unexpectedly, Richard aggressively sought my opinion when the topic of Carter Industries' new projects came up. He used words I never expected to hear from him. Your perspective as an outsider with relevant expertise is valuable. We've been thinking too narrowly. We attended the groundbreaking ceremony for the Margaret Carter Community Center, as it was now formally known. 6 months later, around the ceremonial shovel station, local authorities, community members, and members of the press gathered. While we waited for the presentation to start, Richard came up to me. "Are you going to talk today?" he inquired. "You ought to do it, not me." I was almost as surprised as he was when I said yes. As the moment arrived, I approached the microphone and looked around the assembled audience. I started by saying that this center is more than just a structure. It has to do with foundations. Today will mark the start of the human foundations that form families and communities, as well as the physical foundation. I talked about my mother's ties to Franklin, her support for education, and her belief in community. Her goal was to provide others opportunity. I discussed sustainable architecture as a way to invest in the next generation. Every structure has a backstory. I came to the conclusion that this story would be about change, second chances, and the strength of possibility. Where others might not, my father looked at me as the audience erupted in applause. Genuine respect between equals, not the conditional acceptance I had long wanted, was evident in his expression of pride. I heard him talking to the Franklin mayor at the reception that followed. Unaware that I could hear him, he replied, "My daughter taught me what really matters." She certainly possesses the necessary skills. As the gathering came to an end later that night, he came over to me carrying a small present. "One more thing," he continued with unusual hesitation. "While searching through some storage bins, I came across this." When I opened the box, I discovered a rudimentary architectural model that I had constructed when I was 7 years old. A cardboard and popsicle stick model of my ideal home, replete with solar panels, aluminum foil, and green construction paper for the rooftop garden. "Your mom kept it," he said. "You had a vision that was ahead of your time," she would often say. Everything was embodied in the basic model. My father had finally acknowledged my father's talent, my mother's faith, and my boyhood hopes. I realized then that, like I had done with so many architectural projects, reconciliation was about creating something new on top of the past rather than forgetting it. "Thank you," I said, holding the delicate model with care. "No," he said softly. "I appreciate that you haven't given up on architecture, yourself, or even me, notwithstanding all the justifications I provided." The box I had given him at his retirement had done something I never would have imagined as we stood there and gazed at the ceremonial groundbreaking site. He hadn't only been compelled to see me. It had started to change him, and what neither of us had imagined was feasible had been made possible by that change. A partnership founded on respect for one another rather than duty. Have you ever had to confront someone who didn't know what they were doing? How did you demonstrate your true abilities to them? Post a narrative in the space provided below. To view more videos regarding family dynamics and personal development, please hit the like button and subscribe if this one spoke to you. Don't forget to let someone know that their value isn't based on the constrained opinions of others. I appreciate you watching, and keep in mind that sometimes letting people see who we really are is the best gift we can give them, even when it's challenging.